Naomi Osaka suddenly stopped in the middle of her walk. A four-time Grand Slam champion who has competed under tennis's brightest lights and in front of its biggest crowds, she unexpectedly froze. It wasn't because of a match or a crucial point, but because she had just experienced a moment she couldn't quite take in. What she saw no longer felt like ordinary tennis. It seemed like something much bigger was unfolding. Inside the Porsche Arena, the atmosphere was already different. Stuttgart, usually calm, organized, and predictable, had suddenly been transformed. An estimated 55,000 Filipino fans had traveled into the city. They arrived from Frankfurt, Munich, and all across Europe, taking flights, trains, and long overnight trips just to be there. Hotels were packed, while restaurants echoed with new languages and the familiar sound of Filipino laughter. The streets around the arena filled with waves of blue, red, and yellow. For a few days, it barely felt like Germany. It felt as though the Philippines had come to Stuttgart. But even that was not the most remarkable part, because what happened after the match left everyone stunned. Eala had just suffered a straight sets loss to Leylah Fernandez, 6-4, 6-1. It was another early exit. T was her third straight first-round defeat, the kind of result that normally sends players quickly away from the court, heads lowered and looking for some privacy. That was what everyone expected. But that is not what happened. Instead of leaving, Eala walked toward the crowd. At first, it was just one autograph, then another, then 10 more, and soon there was no stopping it. Minutes passed, and the moment stretched to nearly an hour. She signed everything fans brought to her: caps, shirts, flags, and posters. One fan even handed her an Olympic medal they had brought from home. She stopped, smiled, and signed that as well. She happily posed for photos and hugged children who would likely remember that moment for the rest of their lives. She also took time to listen to overseas Filipino workers who had saved for months, sometimes even years, just to spend a few hours there. There was no hurry in her movements, no checking her phone, and no sign that she wanted the moment to end. She stayed there completely, emotionally and physically, fully present in a situation most athletes would have walked away from. That was when Osaka stopped. From a distance, she stood watching everything unfold. T was a genuine connection between a player and her people. The cameras captured Osaka's reaction, first surprise, then admiration, followed by something quieter, almost like recognition. Even for someone who had experienced worldwide fame, this moment felt different. Finally, she said it, "I've never seen anything like this." And she truly meant it, because this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about rankings, draws, or points. This was about belonging and identity, about a player who, even after losing, chose not to walk away but instead moved closer to her supporters. In that moment, the tennis world began to understand something it had not fully recognized before. What surrounds Eala is not ordinary. It is not something temporary or easy to explain. It is something much stronger and much harder to measure. Naomi Osaka reportedly said to someone on her team while continuing to watch the scene, "She lost. She could have simply walked away, but she stayed for almost an hour. That's special." And that is exactly why the moment felt so different. Inside the Porsche Arena, the focus was no longer on the result. It was no longer about the 6-1, 6-4 loss to Leylah Fernandez. Instead, people witnessed something much rarer in professional sports: an athlete choosing connection over convenience, and staying present instead of walking away. The clip quickly spread online. Within just a few hours, the moment was everywhere. It spread across X, Instagram, and YouTube, quickly gaining millions of views. Fans from different countries, sports, and backgrounds were all responding to the same thing: not the defeat, but the way Alex handled it. One post said, "This is why we love Alex. Win or lose, she never forgets her fans." Another simply wrote, "Naomi's face says it all. Even the biggest champions have taken notice." What Osaka saw was not an isolated moment, but part of something that has been growing since Eala first made her breakthrough on the global stage at the 2025 Miami Open. Since then, her matches have become more than just matches. They have turned into events that bring people together. Much of that connection comes from her background. Eala has openly shared how difficult it was to get access to tennis while growing up in the Philippines. There were few courts, and even fewer opportunities. For years, the sport simply wasn't widely accessible. Now, the situation has completely changed. "When I go back to Manila, it's hard to find a court, and that's a good thing," she said. "When I was younger, they were empty. That change matters because for the millions of Filipinos living across Europe, the Middle East, and North America, Eala represents something much bigger than tennis. She represents opportunity where there was once very little, and possibility where limits once stood in the way. She has helped create a version of the sport that finally feels like it belongs to them as well. That is why the atmosphere surrounding her feels so different. One experienced referee summed it up earlier this season. When players come from countries like the Philippines, the stadium can start to feel like a Davis Cup tie, national, emotional, and loud. That is exactly what Stuttgart became. Those fans did not travel simply to watch a tennis match. They came for identity, pride, and representation. They were not only supporting Eala, they were proudly supporting the Philippines. They were more than spectators, they were part of the moment. Flags filled the air, songs echoed through the concourse, and voices came together in a scene that felt more like a celebration than the aftermath of a match. And right in the middle of it all, Eala continued giving back to the fans. She did not have to stay, but she chose to. One fan said, with tears still fresh, she could have simply walked away. But she stayed. She hugged us. She thanked us. That's why we love her. That was the part that stayed with Naomi Osaka, because Osaka understands the other side of a moment like this better than most. She has spoken openly about the weight of expectations, the pressure of worldwide attention, and the mental strain that comes with being constantly in the spotlight. She knows how hard it can be to face the public after a loss, and how natural it is to step back, protect yourself, and disappear. Yet she watched Eala choose the opposite. The video quickly spread across X, Instagram, and YouTube. Fans slowed the footage down, replayed it, and examined Osaka's reactions frame by frame. One clip showed her standing near the player's entrance, with a hand over her heart and her eyes fixed on the scene. Another captured her turning towards someone on her team, gently shaking her head with an expression that seemed to mix disbelief and admiration. The comments quickly poured in. Naomi gets it. She understands what that connection means. Another fan wrote, "This is why I love tennis, not the trophies but the humanity." When Osaka finally spoke about the moment in a brief interview, her words showed why it had affected her so deeply. "I was just watching her," she said. She had lost a tough match. She could have been upset. She could have reacted with frustration, but instead, she chose gratitude. That was a choice, and it was not an easy one to make. She paused for a moment, speaking carefully like someone who understood the experience firsthand rather than simply watching it. "I've been in that position. I've lost matches where the only thing you want is to leave, avoid talking, and stay away from everyone. That's where the true meaning of that Stuttgart moment lies. It wasn't in the score, the headlines, or the result. It was in the choice to stay, connect with the fans, and give something back even when you feel like you have nothing left." That is what Osaka recognized, and that is why she couldn't look away. "I've lost matches and simply wanted to disappear." Seeing her handle the moment with so much grace was inspiring. It reminded me why I play. Naomi Osaka's words did more than describe what happened, they gave the moment even greater impact. Within hours, the clip of her reaction to Eala was spreading everywhere, adding even more attention to something that was already making waves across the tennis world. Fans were no longer reacting only to Eala's gesture. They were connecting it to Osaka's honesty, her journey, and her openness about the challenges she has faced. Fans saw it as two champions showing genuine respect for each other. Many simply said, "This is what sport is supposed to be." Naomi understood why the moment felt different, and the reactions continued because her perspective carries real weight. Her journey, especially her decision to step away in 2021 to focus on her mental health, changed the way athletes talk about pressure, expectations, and the cost of living under constant attention. She has experienced the reality behind the spotlight, which is why her reaction carried so much meaning. What she saw in Stuttgart was more than kindness, it was a different kind of strength, one that cannot be measured by rankings or trophies. When she said, "She's special, I hope she knows that. I hope she never loses that." It did not sound like simple praise. It sounded like recognition from someone who understood how difficult it can be to remain open when the sport constantly asks more of you. That is what made the moment much bigger than a viral clip. It became a reminder of what tennis can truly be at its best, not just competition, connection. For Eala, the moment reinforced something that is becoming harder to ignore. She is already one of the biggest attractions in women's tennis, not because of Grand Slam titles or a top 20 ranking, but because of something much harder to create: authenticity. She gives her full attention to the people around her. Win or lose, I always make an effort to be grateful, she has said before. Coming from where I come from, I have seen real struggle and understand how much people sacrifice. That perspective influences everything. It explains why she remained on court for nearly an hour after losing, why she takes time to listen when fans speak, and why those interactions never feel like a simple exchange. They feel genuine. That is why people connect with her so strongly. In a sport often measured by results, she offers something beyond the scoreboard, a reason for people to care on a deeper level. I've seen struggle. Even if I haven't experienced all of it myself, I understand what it means, and I appreciate what I have. That mindset is not something Eala simply talks about, it is something she demonstrates. And in Stuttgart, it was impossible to overlook. That is also why Naomi Osaka took notice, because what happened in Stuttgart was about more than tennis. It was about a real and genuine connection, deeply tied to identity. For the Filipino diaspora, Eala represents something much greater than rankings or results. She is proof that someone from Manila can step onto the sport's biggest stages and do more than compete. She can truly belong. And that becomes even more significant when you consider the scale. The Philippines is home to more than 115 million people, with millions more living abroad, nurses in Dubai, engineers in California, caregivers in Canada, and countless others. For decades, this global community had no central tennis figure to unite behind and proudly support. Now they have one. That is why the atmosphere surrounding her feels so different. As one veteran referee explained, when players come from countries like the Philippines, matches can start to feel like the Davis Cup: national, emotional, and united. That is exactly what Stuttgart became. Those fans were not simply supporting Eala, they were supporting their flag, their identity, and their shared story. They sang, waved flags, and transformed the tournament into something that felt like home. And Eala gave that same energy back to them. She didn't have to do that, one fan said through tears. She could have simply left, but she chose to stay. She hugged us and thanked us. That exchange between the player and her supporters is what makes this moment so memorable. But the tour does not stop for emotion. The clay season is only beginning, and it is about to challenge both players in a very different way. Next is the Madrid Open, running from April 21st to May 3rd, where Eala will enter directly into the main draw of a WTA 1000 event. No qualifiers, no extra time to ease into it. After that comes the Italian Open in Rome, from May 6th to 18th, bringing another elite-level field and another increase in intensity. Then comes the biggest clay court stage of them all, the French Open in Paris. That is where everything comes together: momentum, expectations, and pressure. Because between now and Paris, every match matters. Every performance adds another chapter to the story building around her. Fans already believe the upcoming schedule will show whether the results can match the growing attention around her. The clay season is now moving toward its biggest stage, with the French Open in Paris set to conclude on June 7th. It will be the ultimate test, where the stories surrounding players either become stronger or fall apart under pressure. For Naomi Osaka, the journey toward that stage has been anything but easy. The four-time Grand Slam champion is still searching for consistency in 2026, with only a handful of wins so far. But counting her out would be a mistake. Players with her experience and ability do not need perfect form to become dangerous. Sometimes, all they need is one moment. And if the draw eventually puts her across the net from Eala, it would be far more than just another match. It would feel like an event.